Ethan Vance had everything, or at least, that's what the world believed. At 39, he was the face of Zenith Dynamics, the tech conglomerate that redefined AI infrastructure across 3 continents. Forbes named him Silicon Prophet. Time magazine called him the man who saw the future. His net worth danced somewhere north of $900 million, depending on the market that day. He didn't walk through New York City. He glided, tailored suits draped over his athletic frame like silk over steel. Paparazzi caught glimpses of him stepping out of driverless Bentleys, flanked by men in charcoal suits. Boardrooms hushed when he entered. His voice didn't rise, it resonated. But behind the accolades, the articles, the envy, Ethan Vance was unraveling. The public saw power. Ethan felt pressure. They saw vision. He felt fatigue. Every second of his life was choreographed. Breakfast meetings with venture capitalists, mid-morning investor calls, global strategy sessions by dusk. His calendar didn't allow for accidents, much less emotions. He was married to, on paper at least, Vivian Cross, the dazzling PR executive turned socialite, had been his partner in public for 8 years. Their wedding had been featured in Vogue. Their vacation homes graced architecture magazines. But their relationship had curdled into something sterile, 2 brands coexisting for optics. Smiles rehearsed like TED Talks. The cracks weren't loud, they were polite. Averted eyes, missed calls, conversations that lasted seconds too long with others. Love, Ethan realized, didn't die with fireworks. It faded behind mirrored sunglasses and separate Uber rides home. It was a Thursday, late spring. Ethan had just signed a strategic acquisition deal worth $240 million with a Tokyo firm. His executive assistant had smiled wide, congratulating him with the usual reverence. The team clapped as he stepped out of the meeting on the 48th floor. He nodded, gave a barely there smirk, and murmured, "I need air." He drifted toward the executive lounge, silent, steel, and all glass, perched like an eagle's nest above Manhattan. But just before entering, something in his periphery made him pause. Through the tinted glass of an adjacent boardroom, Ethan caught a glimpse of Vivian, her posture elegant, unmistakable. Next to her, Logan Pierce, Ethan's oldest friend, college roommate, and the man who helped him build Zenith Dynamics from 2 laptops in a dorm basement. They weren't talking, they were kissing. Time didn't shatter, it fractured, quietly, without drama. Ethan stood frozen, the filtered light of the boardroom falling like fog around him. Logan's hand slid to Vivian's back. Her eyes closed. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't accidental. It was intimate, real, rehearsed. Something ancient cracked inside him. Not rage, not heartbreak, just silence. Deep, echoing silence. The kind that follows when the world stops pretending. He didn't burst in, didn't shout, no confrontation, just a pivot, elegant, mechanical, like the turn of a machine shutting down. Ethan walked through the halls, past his stunned assistant, into the elevator, descending from the heights of ambition into the guts of the building. And then, outside, the city greeted him with indifference. Yellow cabs honked. Someone shouted about Bitcoin. A cyclist cursed as he swerved around a hot dog cart. Life moved on, as if it hadn't just ended for someone. Ethan kept walking. He didn't know how many blocks. He just moved, like an algorithm short-circuiting. Eventually, he reached a plaza, concrete, minimalist, expensive in its emptiness. A bench waited there, just concrete and steel. No cushions, no comfort. He sat. He didn't cry, not then, just stared at nothing. A man worth almost $1 billion. Who could summon presidents with a phone call, now sitting among pigeons and gum stains. And he couldn't feel a thing. The world didn't stop for Ethan Vance. Why would it? Men like him weren't allowed to break in public. They were expected to be unshakable, impenetrable, permanently composed. But there he sat, one elbow on each knee, head lowered, the weight of betrayal pooling like lead in his chest. He should have been angry. He should have stormed back into that office and dismantled them both, Vivian and Logan, with words sharper than any lawsuit. He had the lawyers, the leverage, the power to end careers with a sentence. But Ethan wasn't angry. He was hollow, like something essential had been scooped out from inside him, leaving a man-shaped husk in a $1,000 suit. A breeze stirred the cuff of his sleeve. He didn't move. A dog barked. A woman passed, glancing at him with faint curiosity, then moved on. Another stranger sat on the other side of the bench, talking on the phone in rapid French. The city, uncaring as ever, flowed around him. And then, 2 sets of footsteps. Light, playful, out of rhythm with the rest of the world. He barely noticed them until they stopped just in front of him. "Excuse me," said a small voice. Ethan blinked. It was the first time he had consciously moved in what felt like hours. 2 little girls stood there, maybe 6 or 7, both blonde. One held a juice box with a crooked straw. The other wore a backpack that was clearly too big for her, covered in glitter stickers and cartoon foxes. They looked like tiny reflections of sunshine in an otherwise gray afternoon. "You look really sad," the one with the juice box said. Ethan stared. He didn't mean to. He didn't know how to respond. It wasn't a question. It wasn't even pity. Just a simple observation, pure, raw, and honest in a way no adult would dare to be. He opened his mouth, but no words came. The second girl tilted her head. "Can we give you a hug?" Silence. For a moment, he thought the question wasn't real. He'd imagined it. He was hallucinating from stress. But they stood there, waiting, sincere, unafraid. Something inside Ethan cracked again, not like glass this time, but like a sealed door slowly giving way. He gave a single nod. And without another word, both girls stepped forward and wrapped their small arms around him, one on each side, pressing their heads gently against his chest. Their fingers clutched at the fabric of his suit, completely unaware of the names stitched on the inside label or the weight of the man beneath it. They didn't care who he was. They only cared that he looked like he needed something. Ethan didn't know how long it lasted. Maybe 10 seconds. Maybe an eternity. When they stepped back, the girl with the backpack smiled and said, "Our mom says hugs fix bad days. Sometimes even bad people." The other one added, "And kindness is free, but you have to give it away. That's the rule." Ethan couldn't breathe. Not properly. His throat was tight, his chest tighter, his eyes, dry for decades, began to sting. He wanted to say something. Thank them, tell them they had just saved a man from something invisible and heavy. But all he managed was a whisper. "Thank you." The girls grinned, gave him thumbs up, and then skipped away, shoes lighting up with each bounce. Their laughter trailing behind them like the echo of something pure. They were gone in less than a minute. But Ethan remained still, staring at the spot where they had been, his hands still hovering where their warmth had touched him. And then, quietly, finally, he cried. Not the kind of cry that came with sobs or drama. Just silent tears, like old dust being washed away. The weight didn't vanish, but it shifted. Something inside him, buried for too long, moved. Not forward, not upward, just moved. It was enough the city returned to motion. But Ethan didn't. He stayed on that bench until the streetlights flickered on, until the shadows lengthened and merged into one continuous gray. The tears dried. His posture didn't change. He was no longer crying. But he wasn't quite breathing either. The girls were gone, but something they left behind clung to him, an echo, a feeling, a presence. For the first time in years, Ethan didn't want to return to his office, or his penthouse, or his carefully curated silence. He wanted to understand what had just happened. The next day, he returned to the bench. Not for business, not for closure, for them. The plaza buzzed as usual. Coffee carts, tourists, bankers walking like they owned the concrete. But Ethan was just a man on a bench now, unshaven, dressed in jeans and a hoodie. The billionaire stripped from his skin like a shed identity. He waited. They didn't come. He returned the next day. And the next. 4 days passed. No light-up shoes, no glittery backpacks, no innocent voices calling out truth like gospel. Just Ethan, waiting in quiet between the beats of a city that never looked anyone in the eyes. On the 5th day, he called in a favor. Quietly, not through channels or assistants. Ethan Vance didn't want to explain this to anyone. He reached out to Malcolm Griggs, the head of security at Zenith Dynamics, an ex-military type who respected silence and cash. A small ask, Ethan said, slipping an envelope across the table in a coffee shop miles from the office. No records, no trail. Griggs gave a silent nod. 2 hours later, Ethan was in a dark security room watching grainy footage on repeat. There, the moment. 2 girls skipping through the plaza. Shoes blinking with each step. They came from the east. A side street, a small corner park, barely visible in the frame. After hugging him, they left in that direction. Ethan replayed the footage again and again. It wasn't much, but it was enough. The next morning, Ethan walked to the corner park, not in a suit, not in anything a Wall Street tabloid would recognize. He wore anonymity like armor. He sat on a splintered bench across from the sandbox, clutching a cup of black coffee from a vendor that spelled his name wrong. He watched. Children screamed with delight. Dogs barked. Parents scrolled their phones. The park was alive in a way his office never was. Time slowed. He came back every day. At first, the girls didn't appear, but something about the park made him stay. It didn't belong to him. No one there cared who he was. It was messy, honest, undisciplined in the way life is before it's sanitized by ambition. Then one Thursday afternoon, while pretending to read a newspaper he'd already memorized, he heard it, the familiar tap-tap of shoes lighting up with each step. He looked up. There they were, Sophie and Isla. He didn't know their names yet, but he knew their energy. One held a melting popsicle, red juice dripping onto her shirt. The other dragged a backpack that scraped the pavement. They were laughing, whispering, full of private jokes and invisible games. Walking beside them was a woman. Not who Ethan expected. She wore a long cotton skirt and a faded gray shirt. Her hair was pulled into a loose knot, strands escaping like ivy. No makeup, no jewelry, just calm. There was something solid about her. Not cold, not severe, just real. The kind of woman who knew what mattered and didn't have time for what didn't. Ethan's breath caught. He didn't move. He just watched. Watched the girls climb monkey bars. Watched the woman sit cross-legged in the grass with a worn paperback in her lap. It took him 10 minutes to stand. Another 5 to cross the distance. He stopped a few feet away. "Excuse me," he said, voice unfamiliar to even himself. Low. Almost uncertain. The woman looked up, not startled, just curious. He gestured to the girls. "I think your daughters hugged me the other day." She raised one brow. Ethan exhaled. "Outside an office building. I was having a hard moment. They didn't know me. I didn't say anything, but they offered me a hug." A beat of silence. Then she smiled, soft and slow. "That sounds like them." Ethan stood awkwardly, hands unsure, heart pounding in ways no merger ever caused. "I just wanted to say thank you," he said, "to you, because I know that kind of kindness doesn't come from nowhere." The woman nodded, eyes thoughtful. "I'm Clara," she said finally, "and you're welcome." The grass beneath his shoes was uneven, dotted with patches of yellow and stubborn dandelions. It wasn't curated like the rooftop garden outside his penthouse or the corporate courtyards he'd once had designed to impress foreign investors. This was real, worn down by time and footsteps and lives that didn't make headlines. Ethan Vance stood a few feet from Clara Bennett, still unsure whether to sit or walk away. She'd just told him her name. Clara. Simple, warm. It didn't try to impress. The way she looked at him, steady but not invasive, threw him off more than he wanted to admit. She wasn't interested in who he had been in magazine spreads or what deals he'd closed in Tokyo. She just wanted to know what he was doing at a playground watching her daughters. "I'm Ethan," he said finally, pushing his hands into the pockets of his hoodie like he needed to hide them. "I figured," Clara replied gently. "You don't have a lost dad energy. More like someone who forgot how to breathe for a while." That made him laugh. Softly, the sound surprised even him. The girls, Sophie and Isla, were already running in circles near the slide. Oblivious to the adult tensions of introductions. It felt wrong to interrupt their joy. So he didn't. Clara turned her gaze back to her book. It had a cracked spine and water-stained edges. You can sit, if you want. So he did. Not beside her. That felt too presumptuous. Instead, he dropped to the grass a safe distance away, still closer to her than anyone had been in weeks. Months. Really. For a while, neither of them spoke. Ethan wasn't used to silence that didn't demand to be filled. In his world, quiet meant you were missing an opportunity. You filled air with ideas, pictures, numbers. Here, in this pocket of city chaos carved out by playground fences and mom-packed snack bags. Silence felt like permission. Your girls, he said eventually, they're kind. Clara looked up, her smile small but genuine. Yeah, they are. I didn't realize how much I needed that hug. He continued, until after they walked away. Clara didn't offer sympathy. She didn't pat his arm or say things like, I'm sorry. She just nodded, letting his words hang in the warm breeze. Most people don't realize they're drowning, she said after a moment, until someone else reaches in. He looked at her then, not like a man assessing a situation, but like someone listening for the first time in a long time. Her eyes weren't flashy, they weren't made up, but they had depth, like rivers that had seen too many storms and still kept flowing. Ethan opened his mouth, then shut it. What could he say? That his wife and business partner had betrayed him. That the empire he built now felt like a glass palace with cracks too deep to mend. That he didn't recognize his own reflection anymore. Instead, he asked, "Can I see you again?" Clara raised an eyebrow, not in suspicion, but in measured curiosity. "I'm here most afternoons, after school." She didn't say yes, she didn't say no, she just gave him a place to return to. That night, Ethan didn't go home. Home was a sterile tower of glass and chrome. Instead, he found himself checking into a boutique hotel downtown, one without a view, without a doorman that recognized him. He needed anonymity like oxygen. In the morning, he walked to the park again. And again the day after. He never brought anything flashy. No phone, no watch, just black coffee and time he no longer owed anyone. Clara was there, reading, the girls, playing. Each time, he sat a little closer. Each time, she spoke a little more. She told him about teaching, how substitute work paid little but gave her mornings free. She worked evenings at a used bookstore, which smelled like dust and forgotten dreams. Her late husband, Daniel, had been a firefighter, died pulling a child from a fifth-story apartment 3 years ago. Ethan didn't interrupt. He didn't ask follow-up questions. He didn't offer money or solutions. He just listened. And in doing so, something shifted. He stopped being Ethan Vance, the man with contingency plans. He became Ethan, the man on the grass. Learning how to breathe again. There was no official invitation, no scheduled meeting, no calendar reminder. Ethan just kept showing up. At first, he felt like a ghost haunting the edge of someone else's life. He didn't belong there. Not really. The people in that park were ordinary. Parents balancing juice boxes and broken strollers. Children yelling about imaginary dragons. Grandmothers exchanging coupons over knitting. Ethan Vance had once presented at the World Economic Forum. Now he sat on grass stained with juice and sidewalk chalk. And he found himself returning to it again and again. Clara didn't ask why he came. She didn't press for details about the life he'd clearly left behind. She noticed the dark circles under his eyes, the way his shoulders curled inward when he wasn't watching, and the way he always looked up when Sophie or Isla laughed, as if their voices were pulling him from somewhere deep. She didn't ask, she just let him stay. Over time, the distance between their seats on the grass shortened. Ethan started bringing small snacks for the girls, fruit slices, string cheese, juice boxes. Clara protested at first, said he didn't have to, but he only smiled and said, "I like to feel useful." That became his role. Useful. He lifted Isla when she scraped her knee. He untangled Sophie's shoelaces with fingers used to typing code into millions. He helped Clara carry bags when it rained. None of it was planned. All of it mattered. One Thursday, Clara handed him a wrapped sandwich. "You keep feeding them. It's only fair." He chuckled and accepted it. It was turkey and avocado. Simple. Made with intention. "Thanks," he said. "I don't think I've had a sandwich someone else made in years." Clara smiled without answering. Sometimes, her silence spoke louder than words. One day, after the girls ran off toward the swings, Clara turned to him and asked, "Do you ever miss it?" Ethan didn't pretend not to understand. "The boardrooms, the cameras?" he asked. She shrugged. "The world where everything came with a title and a PR angle." He thought about it, then said, "I miss being needed, not for money or decisions, but needed in a real way." Clara studied him. "You are, just maybe in smaller ways now." And that stuck with him. That night, Ethan walked through a grocery store by himself for the first time in over a decade. No assistant, no digital list, just a basket in his hand and memories of peanut butter preferences and juice flavors. He bought too much, but it didn't matter. The next day, when Clara saw him carrying the paper bags, she gave him a look. Not annoyed, not grateful, just surprised. "You trying to bribe your way into favorite grown-up status?" "Maybe," he admitted. "How am I doing?" Sophie popped up beside them, grabbing an apple. "Top 3, Isla chimed in, "but we don't tell the others." Ethan laughed. He hadn't laughed like that in months. Over the next few weeks, Ethan stopped checking the stock tickers every morning. He stopped responding to every message from his assistant. He even muted his calendar alerts. He wasn't disappearing. He was reappearing in the places that mattered. Like the moment Clara taught Sophie how to tie a double knot and Isla baked muffins using a recipe she invented. Or when Clara cried laughing at a story about Ethan's college roommate microwaving a hard-boiled egg in their dorm and causing an explosion. Those moments didn't show up in annual reports. But they were everything. It was a gray afternoon when Clara finally told him about Daniel. They were sitting on a park bench beneath a sycamore tree. The girls were chasing bubbles nearby, their shrieks of joy floating through the breeze. Ethan had just handed Clara a cup of coffee from the corner vendor she liked, the one with terrible lids and amazing cinnamon buns. She held the cup for a long time before speaking. He was supposed to be home early that night. Ethan didn't interrupt. Daniel never brought his work home with him. That was the rule. Firefighting was intense, unforgiving, but when he stepped through our front door, he was just Daniel. He danced with the girls in the kitchen. He read the same book 5 times if they asked. He burned toast like it was a talent. Her voice didn't tremble. It was too practiced for that. Worn smooth like sea glass. That night, he took one last call. Apartment fire in Queens. Kids stuck on the 5th floor. His shift was over. He could have left it, but he didn't. She paused. Ethan didn't breathe. They got the boy out. Alive. Daniel didn't make it. The wind moved around them. Respectful, gentle. "I don't tell people that for pity," Clara said after a long silence. "It's just part of who I am now. And part of who the girls are." Ethan nodded. Not in sympathy. In understanding. He'd met grief before, but never one that had learned how to live beside you like a shadow. Not in front of you like a wall. "I didn't know what to do after he died," she continued. "I didn't have a job. No plan. Just 2 little girls and a house full of echoes." She looked at him now. Really looked. "That's what it feels like. Doesn't it, when everything you built gets stripped down in one moment?" Ethan's jaw tightened. "Yes," he said simply. Clara didn't push. She didn't ask for details. She just let him fill the silence if he wanted to. And for the first time, he did. "My wife and my business partner," he said. "They weren't just having an affair. They planned to take the company." Clara's eyebrows rose slightly, but she said nothing. "They manipulated board votes, stacked the leadership against me. I was too busy building the future to realize they were erasing my name from it." He paused. Caught them mid-kiss, on the 48th floor, right after I signed a deal that was supposed to change everything. Clara winced softly. It wasn't the kiss, Ethan added. It was the smile on her face. Like she'd already moved on. Like I was just the last task on a list. He looked away. I walked out. Didn't yell, didn't fight, just left. Sat on a bench a few blocks down and thought about how easy it is to lose everything you thought made you real. A soft laugh escaped him. Bitter, self-aware. And then two little girls walked up and offered me a hug. Clara's eyes glistened. They do that sometimes, she said quietly, offer more than they understand. They saved me, he whispered. She reached out, just a small gesture, and placed her hand gently on his. No promises, no rescue, just presence. And that, Ethan realized, was all he needed. Ethan didn't expect to be invited. Not into Clara's world, not really. They shared space, park benches, laughter over spilled juice boxes, silence that wrapped around wounds neither of them had fully named. But entering someone's home, that was different. That meant being seen in unguarded light. No curated image, no exits hidden in polite excuses. So when Clara said, "We're having spaghetti tonight if you want to stay," he froze. They were standing outside her building, an old brick walk-up nestled between a laundromat and a flower shop that always smelled like crushed eucalyptus. Sophie was tugging at his sleeve, proudly showing him a drawing of a rainbow with 5 suns. Isla danced in circles on the sidewalk. He hesitated. Clara didn't push, but she did smile. There's garlic bread. And somehow, that tipped the scale. He followed him up 3 flights of creaky stairs, each one worn from decades of tenants and time. Her door was slightly scuffed. A sticker of a star faded near the top. Inside, it was chaotic, lived in, shoes in a pile, crayon marks on the wall, the scent of tomato sauce and something sweet in the oven. Ethan had dined in restaurants where 1 bottle of wine cost more than Clara's monthly rent. But this was the first place that had ever smelled like comfort. Dinner wasn't perfect. The noodles were overcooked. Sophie spilled water twice. Isla dropped her fork and insisted on eating with her fingers. But the conversation was alive, organic. The kind you didn't find in boardrooms. Clara moved through the kitchen like someone who didn't apologize for messes. She wiped counters with one hand while flipping garlic bread with the other. When she laughed, it came from somewhere deep, like she hadn't forgotten how. Ethan took a bite of the pasta and nearly choked on emotion. It was the first real meal he'd had that wasn't prepared by a private chef in over a year. "You okay?" Clara asked from the stove. He nodded, clearing his throat. "This is amazing." Isla grinned. "Mom's spaghetti fixes everything," Sophie added. "Even sad hearts." Ethan smiled at them both. "Then I'll take a second helping." After dinner, the girls pulled him into a blanket fort made of sofa cushions and unicorn-patterned sheets. They called it Mission Snuggle Fortress, and informed him he was now Commander Snuggle Pants. He didn't argue, he just laughed, until his cheeks hurt and the tightness in his chest loosened a little more. Clara watched from the hallway, arms crossed, an amused expression on her face. She didn't say anything, just let it happen. Ethan felt the shift then. Not in her, in himself. He wasn't visiting anymore, he was arriving. Later, after the girls fell asleep mid-sentence, Ethan helped Clara clean the kitchen. She handed him a dish towel. He didn't flinch. "I used to think love was about impressive things," he said, wiping a plate. "Grand gestures, big promises, headlines." Clara leaned against the counter. And now, he looked around, the mismatched chairs, the fridge covered in magnets and crooked art. "Now I think it might just be about this." Clara didn't respond immediately. She just took the plate from his hand and placed it carefully in the cabinet. "Stay for tea?" she asked. He did. They sat on the fire escape under a sky fading into violet. Steam rose from mismatched mugs. The city hummed below, but it didn't feel like it belonged to them anymore. "You don't have to keep showing up," she said after a while. "I know," he replied. "But you do." "I want to." She nodded. eyes fixed on the horizon. Then maybe we can stop pretending you're just visiting. The first time Ethan skipped a board meeting. No one noticed. The second time, he got 10 calls in under an hour, his assistant, 2 division heads, even a senator on speed dial. He silenced them all. It wasn't rebellion, it wasn't a breakdown, it was choice. And it terrified him. For most of his adult life, Ethan Vance's value had been measured in productivity. His worth defined by metrics, deals closed, valuations climbed, cities conquered. He had trained himself to see hours not as time, but as leverage. A morning free was a mistake. A weekend off, weakness. But now he woke up to tiny feet thumping down a hallway. Not email alerts. He poured cereal instead of reviewing slide decks. He walked Sophie and Isla to school while Clara packed lunches, hair tied in a messy knot, still humming some forgotten 90s tune under her breath. It was disorienting, like stepping into a life he didn't know he'd been starving for. One morning, while Isla searched for her missing shoe and Sophie debated whether unicorn socks made her faster, Clara handed Ethan a folded note. He opened it. Inside was a drawing. A stick figure with a crooked smile holding hands with 2 smaller stick figures. The words, "Best day ever," with Ethan, scrawled beneath it in pink crayon. He stared at it longer than necessary. Clara tilted her head. "You okay?" He nodded, but something cracked open in his chest. A part of him that had once been a boy, long before the boardrooms and battles for dominance, remembered what joy without achievement felt like. He started showing up for everything. Parent-teacher nights, grocery runs, Saturday markets. He helped Clara fix a leaking sink using a YouTube video and blind optimism. He spent half a Sunday attempting to assemble a wobbly bookshelf while Isla offered supervision, and Sophie read the instructions out loud in a British accent. And slowly, imperceptibly, the world he once dominated began to fade from his bones. Not completely, not yet, but enough that when his assistant sent him a calendar reminder about an exclusive gala, an annual gathering of the tech elite hosted on a yacht, Ethan stared at the screen and deleted it. No regrets. Instead, that evening, he stood at a school fundraiser booth helping sell cupcakes decorated like astronauts. The frosting kept sliding off. Isla smeared glitter on her cheek. Sophie charged everyone extra if they smiled. Clara, standing a few feet away, met his eyes across the chaos and smiled. That smile undid him more than any balance sheet ever could. That night, as they walked home, Isla on his shoulders and Sophie skipping ahead, Ethan realized something had shifted. He wasn't searching anymore. He was living. And not as a CEO. Not as a man the world wanted something from. Just Ethan. The buzz came just after breakfast. Ethan was standing in Clara's kitchen, barefoot, flipping pancakes while Sophie and Isla debated the merits of chocolate chips versus blueberries. Clara was humming beside the stove, pouring orange juice into mismatched cups when Ethan's phone, forgotten for the past 2 hours, lit up across the room. It didn't stop buzzing. He ignored it at first. He'd trained himself to do that. In this new life, pings didn't equal power, notifications didn't dictate worth, but something in the frequency, the persistence, pulled at him. He walked over. 27 missed calls, 18 messages, 3 voicemails from his legal team. His chest tightened, not from panic, not anymore, just instinct. He tapped into one of the messages. A text from Nora, his former chief legal advisor. "Ethan, you need to see this. Now." Attached was a link. He clicked. The video was grainy, clearly filmed on a phone. In low light, possibly through a cracked door. But the audio was clear. Vivian's voice, followed by Logan's, laughing, toasting glasses of wine in what looked like a lounge, somewhere discreet. Expensive. They were talking about him. Not romantically, not emotionally, strategically. Removing Ethan was overdue. Vivian was saying, "He built the ship but forgot we were always steering it." Logan smirked. "He was too soft. Always had a weakness for sentiment. That's how we got the board to turn." They spoke of manipulated votes. asset redirection, shareholder influence, even a private server used to reroute internal company emails, keeping Ethan blind while they shifted power beneath him. It wasn't just betrayal, it was corporate sabotage. Planned, executed, documented. Ethan stood frozen, the phone still in his hand. Screen now dark. The room had quieted. Sophie had noticed his stillness. Isla tilted her head, sensing something was off in the rhythm of the morning. He turned slowly, smiled the way adults do when they're shielding children from fire. "Everything's okay," he said gently. "Why don't you two finish decorating those pancakes?" The girls obeyed without question. But Clara, walking back in from the hallway, caught the shift. She said nothing, just watched him. He met her eyes. A pause, then a small nod. That evening, after the girls were asleep, he showed her the video. No commentary, no anger, just evidence. Clara watched it without flinching. When it ended, she looked at him, not with shock, not with pity, but with the steadiness of someone who'd known deep betrayal and had survived it. "I'm sorry," she said simply. Ethan nodded, but to his own surprise, there was no rage in him. Not anymore. That part of him had died on the 48th floor. The day Vivian smiled at Logan like Ethan was a finished project. He was tired of letting bitterness write his story. The next morning, he met with his legal team. Not in a skyscraper, not in a press room. Just a private office downtown, wood paneling. No cameras. "I want you to handle it quietly," he said. "No headlines, no drama, just truth." They nodded. They knew him well enough not to question the tone. Over the next 3 weeks, documents were filed, testimonies were gathered, patterns of deceit were exposed like rot beneath paint. The board flipped. Investors pulled out of Logan's new ventures. Vivian's name was scrubbed from panels. Endorsements vanished. The media began to circle like sharks sensing blood. But Ethan, he didn't watch. He didn't cheer. He simply sold the last of his Zenith shares and transferred half the proceeds to the Embrace Project, his foundation supporting single mothers and displaced families. The other half, he used it to buy a house. Not a mansion, not a compound with gates and guards. Just a modest, sun-drenched home at the edge of the city. Trees lining the street, a small porch with chipped paint. A backyard Clara said looked wild with potential. The first night they moved in, Sophie insisted they camp in the living room. Blankets, flashlights, the smell of burnt popcorn. Ethan lay awake under a sleeping bag beside them, staring at the cracked ceiling, thinking not of stocks or speeches, but of how full this quiet little house already felt. He never told the girls what really happened with Vivian or Logan. He only told them this: some people get lost chasing the wrong things. And left it at that. That, Clara would later say, was the moment she knew he had truly changed. Not because he walked away from revenge, but because he walked toward peace. One night, as they sat together under the stars in their new backyard, Clara resting her head on his chest, the scent of cut grass still fresh in the air, she whispered something he would never forget. What they tried to destroy wasn't you. It was the image they built of you. The real you. He's still here. Ethan didn't respond. He didn't need to, because in that moment, with her hand in his, and laughter echoing faintly from an upstairs window, he finally believed her. The man they tried to erase was gone. But the one sitting here, he had never been more real. It came to him on a Tuesday. No thunderclap, no epiphany, just a quiet realization as he stood in the kitchen, flipping pancakes shaped like stars because Isla insisted the moons looked too sleepy. Clara was behind him, folding laundry, humming to a tune he didn't recognize. Sophie and Isla were arguing, again, about whether syrup should go on top or beside the pancakes. And Ethan Vance, once one of the most powerful tech CEOs in the country, was wearing socks with cartoon cats and a t-shirt that read "Caffeine equals love." And he was happy, not momentarily amused, not distracted by novelty, happy, whole. It hit him like warm sunlight through an open window. He didn't want this to be a chapter. He wanted it to be the story. He waited a week before saying anything. Not because he doubted it, but because some moments deserved stillness. Thought, grace. He watched them all more closely that week, Clara brushing Sophie's hair, Isla talking to herself while she colored, the way the house creaked when it settled at night. He memorized those details like he used to memorize contracts. Then, one afternoon, while Clara was at work and the girls were helping him bake cookies, he knelt down on the kitchen floor and looked them in the eyes. "Can I ask you something?" he said, voice softer than usual. Sophie nodded dramatically. Isla licked frosting off her finger. "What would you think," he asked, "if I asked your mom to marry me?" The silence lasted all of 2 seconds. Then they shrieked. Loud, joyous, unapologetically chaotic. "Are we getting married too?" Isla shouted, throwing a handful of flour into the air like confetti. Sophie ran in circles chanting, "Say yes, say yes, say yes." Ethan laughed until his ribs hurt. He didn't propose that day. But the plan began to form. Not a grand gesture, not a magazine spread. Something real. He brought them back to the park that weekend. The same bench. The same spot. Clara thought it was just a picnic. She wore her hair down, the breeze catching it in waves. She laughed as the girls ran after a balloon vendor, unaware of the ring box in Ethan's coat pocket. When the girls ran ahead, he turned to her. They sat in familiar silence for a moment. Then he reached into his coat and placed the box in her hand. No words. Just breath. Clara stared at it, then at him. He spoke slowly, carefully. "I don't have a speech," he said. "I don't have the right words. I just know that every good thing in my life now begins with you. And I want to build the rest of it, with you." And the girls. Not as a guest, as family. Her hands trembled slightly as she opened the box. The ring wasn't extravagant. No oversized diamonds. Just a single sapphire, the same shade as Isla's eyes. She didn't say anything for a long time. Then she smiled, tears forming. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes." The girls returned seconds later, screaming in delight as if they had known all along. Sophie shouted, "Can we have cake today even if it's not the wedding yet?" Isla added, "Do we get to wear crowns?" Clara laughed through her tears. And Ethan, who once thought legacy came from influence, realized his legacy now had freckles, messy ponytails, and glitter shoes. The wedding was held in their backyard. No velvet invitations, no orchestra, just string lights they hung together, paper flowers Isla made by hand, and chairs borrowed from neighbors. Clara wore a simple dress the color of warm sand. Ethan wore a suit with his sleeves rolled to his elbows, a child's bracelet on one wrist, handmade by Sophie the night before. They exchanged vows handwritten on scrap paper. Ethan promised to never stop learning how to love her. Clara promised to never let him forget who he was without the world watching. Sophie and Isla shouted, "I do," before the adults could speak. Afterward, they grilled food, played music from a dusty speaker, and told stories around a fire pit. Friends brought pies. A neighbor brought a guitar. Someone sang Under the Stars. No one posted on social media. No one tagged a location. Because it wasn't for the world. It was for them. It was real. And Ethan, standing under a sky filled with soft laughter and fireflies, knew with absolute certainty he had never been richer. A year passed quietly. Not the kind of quiet that feels like absence, but the kind that comes from peace, from knowing you're where you're meant to be. Ethan Vance no longer woke up to flashing notifications or tense calendar alerts. He woke up to the smell of toast, to Clara's soft laughter in the next room, to Sophie and Isla arguing about which cereal box toy was superior. He no longer measured success in deals closed or headlines made. Now, it was in Isla calling him Dad when she thought no one heard. In Sophie slipping her hand into his during the walk to school. In Clara resting her head on his chest after a long day and whispering, "I'm glad you're home." The man who once ruled glass towers now spent his mornings watering the tiny vegetable patch behind their house. The tomatoes were crooked, the carrots stunted, but the girls called it Ethan's farm, and that made it enough. The Embrace project grew, not fast, not flashy, but real, solid, tangible. Ethan poured himself into it with the same intensity he once reserved for corporate empires. Only now, the meetings were held in repurposed community centers. The victories measured in mothers rehoused, children given backpacks, tears turned into laughter. Sometimes people would recognize him. They'd whisper, "Isn't that Ethan Vance?" And he'd smile, shake hands, listen, really listen, because now, he wasn't trying to impress anyone. He was trying to serve something bigger than image. Of course, there were hard days. There were mornings when Clara would go quiet, her eyes staring somewhere he couldn't follow. When memories of Daniel came in waves she didn't speak aloud. There were nights Ethan woke up from dreams where he was back in that boardroom, watching everything fall apart again. But they had learned how to sit in the dark together. They didn't rush grief. They didn't pretend it wasn't there. They held hands through it. And that, Ethan had come to understand, was what love really was. Not a perfect fairy tale, but choosing, again and again, to stay. One crisp autumn afternoon, nearly a year to the day since that first hug on the bench, the four of them returned to the park. The same bench, the same spot. Sophie and Isla were taller now, but still insisted on chasing pigeons and giggling uncontrollably. Clara sat with a book, a thermos of tea in her lap. Ethan watched them all, and then he looked at the bench, the place where his life had quietly unraveled. And then, miraculously, began again. He reached out, took Clara's hand, and whispered, "It all started right here." She leaned against him. "Some beginnings don't look like beginnings," she said. He nodded, then looked out at the playground, the leaves falling gently around them. And for the first time in a very, very long time, he felt whole. Thank you for watching this episode of Nhan Stories. If this story moved you, inspired you, or gave you even a moment of quiet reflection, please consider subscribing to the channel. Your support helps bring more heartfelt stories to life. Like the video if you felt connected. Share it with someone who needs it. And comment below. We'd love to know which part of Ethan's journey stayed with you most. This isn't just a channel. It's a place for real stories, told with care. See you in the next one.